Each of these panelists is a Texas Alliance for Life board member, and they all share a common thread. Their stories are woven together by adoption, but their stories are unique and that each of them have a different perspective. And so I've asked them to, in 1 minute roughly, give us an overview of how adoption played a role in their journey. And I'm going to start here with Donna Davidson.
So I'm Donna Davidson, and I was married 19 and a half years before the Lord brought Mary Grace to us. When people ask who my adoption agent was, it was Jesus. It was God, because we got a phone call out of the blue saying that a baby was going to be born in 7 weeks. Would we be interested in adopting her? That's my story in a nutshell. If you ever want to hear the whole story, come back by.
But we're going to dig out as much as we can. All right, Jerry Ann, go ahead.
My connection, I'm a birth mom, but I also worked for over 20 years as a social worker with adoption and foster care. And I am always an advocate for adoption, and I've spoken before doctors and nurses and professionals to help educate what adoption is, and it is my passion. And so I am open all the time to speak about adoption.
And my name is Jim Shaw. I was what was called a gray market baby. So Dr. Brown called my dad and said there was a 17-year-old girl who was about to give birth, and would he be interested, much like your story. And so not too long after that, Mrs. Green delivered me to my parents. I was born in Roswell, New Mexico, and I tell my kids they are at least 1/4 alien.
Maybe they can get a college scholarship for that. Well, Jim, I'm going to let you keep the mic. And I want to ask you, you were adopted yourself and then you chose to adopt. How did your personal experience influence your decision to adopt children? And what was it like to navigate adoption from both perspectives, as the child and as the parent?
Well, it's kind of funny because my parents, they were very upfront about my adoption. As a matter of fact, growing up, I had 2 birthdays, which, when you're like 4, that's awesome. So I would have my regular birthday. My friends would come over. We'd do cake and stuff like that. And then a week later, the whole family would go out to dinner, my choice, usually Dairy Queen or something like that. You're 4. So for me, adoption was just always a part of my life. And then when I was in college, I was supposed to write a paper about something. So I went down to the state and I looked at the adoption and realized that it wasn't quite as easy as Dr. Brown in delivering. So I started to write a paper, and then eventually, about 25 years ago, Joe approached me about Texas Alliance for Life, and I said, well, I'm interested in that. And then eventually, I realized that there were a lot of babies being born that needed help. And so my wife and I, we became foster parents. There's not a lot of people for the babies. So we said, we're going to foster babies. And for us, it came down to when those, oddly enough, the time the babies that you do foster don't come up for adoption. But for us, first one, second one, they came up.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. Jerry Ann, can you share your journey of placing your child for adoption?
Yes, I can. And I'm going to keep it short. One of the things that I have found as a professional in working with birth moms is that you don't usually find birth mothers that are close to 30 years old. I mean, I know there's some people here who can agree with me on that. Usually they're teenagers. I was 29 years old, really getting ready to start my life, going to college to get my degree in social work. At that time, I had a 1.5, 2.5, and a 7-year-old, all boys. And when I found out that I was pregnant, the relationship was pretty bad and very rocky, actually. And I knew I needed to make a plan. I wasn't quite sure what that plan would be. I actually, ashamed to say that I went to an abortion clinic to get my pregnancy test done because back in 1988, they didn't have over-the-counter pregnancy tests. I did work very closely with a pro-life organization, but I was so ashamed and devastated by what the news that I received that I couldn't face my church. I couldn't face my pastor, nobody. I knew not to have an abortion because I was educated enough on it that I knew it was murder. And so consequently, I ended up making an adoption plan. Excuse me. And it wasn't an easy thing to do. I mean, any woman that you speak with who is on the fence is going to have a really hard time in making that decision. And I think the thing that needs to be stressed, number one, is that they are surrounded by people, whether it's in their church, their family, friends, who are positive about their adoption plan, that they will not ridicule them or shame them for the decision that they're making, because really it is a very loving choice. And I was able to find a couple who adopted my son, Sean, and they lived in Colorado. And it was such a journey. I can't even take the time right now to go through the entire thing, but I can honestly say, God gives us second chances. He is a God of redemption. And I received that through my pregnancy and through the people that loved me and surrounded me with their love and support. And it didn't go ultimately the way I wanted it to. It was an open adoption, but then it turned into a closed adoption. But that was okay. I had no regrets about that. I was a little angry, disappointed because I was supposed to have contact with them and I did not. They kind of closed the door on that. But when he was 18, I really hoped that I would see him again. And I wrote him throughout his whole life. Every year on his birthday, he got a card. He got pictures of me and my kids. He got a letter from me. But I'm going to continue later with the meeting part of it. But I have no regrets over my plan because I know he was loved. He got things in his life that I could not give him. I was a single mother. I was on welfare at the time. I was, using everything that the system had to, I lived in low income housing. I did everything, Medicare, you name it, or Medicaid, I should say. So I took advantage of the system to help me and my kids survive. And then during those 4 years, I went to school full time because I wanted stability for my children. I wanted them to see me, and I wanted to be able to have some routine in our lives where we actually sat down for dinner every night. And if I had gone to school and worked, they would have been in daycare, or my mother, God bless her, or, I would never have seen them, and I would have been stressed out, and God only knows if I would have even made it to college. So I have no regrets for that decision that I made.
So tell me then, what was it like meeting your child years later?
Well, I hadn't planned. I honestly didn't think that I would ever meet him. And the first one who met him was my youngest son, Tim. And thank God for Facebook. He found him. And Timmy was living in Washington. Sean is in Colorado, still there. And Timmy had a meeting with him in Colorado. And the first meeting, Sean didn't show up. I think he was probably very scared, very nervous. And Tim's like, oh, Mom, he never showed up. So, but they did have a second meeting. And so ironically, and I know this is all God, my middle son, Jason, got a job in the same town where Sean lived. So they have a relationship. They are Uncle Sean to my grandkids. They get together holidays, birthdays, all the time. So I was he never wanted to meet me. They never talked about me. I don't know what it is about boys, but they never brought it up. Like, do you want to meet Mom? That would have been an easy question.
Seems like a no-brainer.
Hey, you want to meet Mom? I mean, they stood around one day and Sean showed them all the letters that I wrote, all the pictures that I sent. I was like the elephant, like, who sent these? Obviously I did, but I didn't get zero credit for doing that. And I always would ask Jason, did you talk about me? No, Mom, we didn't talk about you. So, and then my oldest son, Michael, he lives in Jarrell. He made a special trip to meet Sean as well. So all three of my kids, I was actually happy that they have that relationship with him. And I thought, if he never wants to meet me, I'm okay. And so to climax this part of it, we were invited, my husband and I, a couple of years ago. Jason invited us to my granddaughter's graduation from high school. And he told me, he said, Mom, I just want you to be prepared. Sean's going to be there. And I said, well, does Sean know that I'm going to be there? Because I'm fine with it. If he shows up, I'm fine with it. They did. And let me tell you, he did not show up for the graduation, but my son, Jason, he rented an Airbnb for 14 of us to stay in, which was really cool. I had all my boys and the wives, except one of the wives couldn't make it. So in the afternoon, I was like, oh, Sean didn't make it. I did not have my hopes set on this. Okay. So in the afternoon, Jason grilled and everybody in the house that was on my daughter-in-law's side, they all left. It was really providential because nobody knew what was next to come. Everybody knew, my husband knew, my boys knew, because Sean had texted them and said, I'll be there in a bit. And Jason didn't know what a bit was, that could have been 5 minutes or it could have been 5 hours. I had no idea. And then there was a knock on the door and Sean was there. And so at that time he was 36.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
So there was a great reunion. I wish we had videoed it.
Yeah.
Somebody had, but I do have pictures.
But boys, they're not going to think of things like that.
And all of us cried. All the girls cried. I mean, it was an awesome experience.
Thank you for sharing that with us. Donna, what was the most rewarding and most challenging part, I can already guess the answer, of your adoption journey, and how has it changed your family dynamic?
Okay, so can you, 43 years old, my husband, 7 weeks later after you find out a baby's going to be born, what do you have to do? Okay, so, hey, my husband is like Nehemiah. For anybody who is here, like, a bureaucrat, you tell him something cannot be done, he's going to go and get it done, right? So we had 7 weeks. I told you, who was our adoption agent? So did we have criminal background checks? Did we have a crib? Did we have anything? Nada. Okay, just nada. So we did it all, had everything ready. And then Greg was like, okay, we've got everything ready. Where's the baby? We had to wait. By the time we got everything ready, she was born the next week. And we were so excited because criminal background checks, home help. You have to have a home study. You have to have all of that stuff. How did that change our lives? I got to be called mommy. That huge change. And we knew that there was going to be a change coming. Because for those of you who are old enough, and it was mentioned at our table earlier, back when the hanging Chad thing was going on, we were going to be on call. So instead of going and having Thanksgiving with our family, we had Thanksgiving just the two of us, which unheard of. I'm the fourth of six. You know what I'm saying? Okay. So we had that Thanksgiving together and both knew that something was going to change by the next Thanksgiving. We both felt, I said, I have the feeling this is our last Thanksgiving, just the two of us. And he said, I kind of woke up knowing that it was too quiet. Like something's going to happen. I said, well, I don't know if your mom and dad are moving in with us. I don't know what this means. I really said that. And so we just were open, willing, and obedient, which is oh no, Donna's being, oh, whoa again. So being open, willing, and obedient when we got that call and we followed it through and she met us, tongue ring. We asked why, just everything. And she still chose us to be the adoptive parents for her child. And remember, all of your children are chosen. All of your children are chosen to be in your families. And so we knew she was our chosen child because I had asked the Lord for a child that would look just like my husband. I didn't specify how I was going to get him or her, and it ended up being her. And Mary Grace looks a lot like my husband. If you ever saw them together, if you ever saw all three of us together, you'd never know. her birth father has some Hispanic heritage too. So she looks like a blend of us, and it's really great. And so how did that change our lives? Well, golf and everything else in our lives suddenly became something we did, parental units, as she likes to call us. And so the parental units were doing everything that you do as a parental unit. And so I love it. She's following somewhat in our footsteps because she works near the Capitol. She's working for some lobbyists. My husband works in the governor's office, and I work around the Capitol. So, it was just meant to be, and the Lord provided.
Well, you can hold on to that mic. I'll direct the next question to you first, and then it's just popcorn. We can talk. If anybody wants to chime in, pop in, you are welcome to. Donna, what misconceptions about adoption do you often encounter, and how would you address them?
I think even when we were struggling with the idea of adoption, we didn't realize how many people we knew that were adopted. It was amazing how the Lord just opened. So many people that we worked with, so many people that we were around that we didn't know were adopted. And I think it's because a lot of people say, oh, they don't want to say I was given up for adoption. I don't say that. My daughter was given more. My daughter was given a mommy and a daddy. My daughter was given more because of her birth mother's sacrifice. She also has more because Alicia ended up getting married, and she has 4 surviving children from additional pregnancies. She's lost one. And then, unfortunately, we won't talk about that part. But she is amazing, and she has always been so brave. The birth father has never had a relationship with us. And so I just constantly stress to Mary Grace the courage of her birth mother to have the relationship with us to do this. And so I think a common misconception is that you can't have a successful open adoption. Yeah, you can.
Misconceptions. A lot of people think that birth moms are terrible people because they gave their child away. And that leads me into talking also a little bit about positive language, because when we're talking to birth moms, and I say there's people out there that can relate to what I'm saying. How you present something to someone is how it's going to be perceived. And if I'm going to use negative language, it's going to be perceived that way. And I could get on my soapbox talking about misconceptions, but there's a lot of them. There's a lot of myths and facts about adoption. The truth of the matter is that women who are birth moms who make an adoption plan, you notice I don't say give up or give away or put up. It's either make an adoption plan or they place their child for adoption, because it gives more of an empowerment to the birth mom. It gives her that position to say, I get to say where my child goes. I get to say what I want for my child. It's a very loving, selfless act. It is not cruel. It's hard. It seems weird in some ways to say that, I'm carrying this child, but I know I want something better for him or her. And that is to give him a loving and, more stable environment. I was working on giving that to my 3 children at that time. So it was very hard to try to add another child in that mix. And they were young. 1.5, 2.5, that would have been like having triplets. But there was a lot of other reasons that I made that plan. But you can look online. There are myths and facts about adoption. There's a whole lot of them. And that's just one that I want to share right now.
No, and that's important. If you saw us chuckling up here, like we had a little inside humor around that answer. We did. We had a pre-meeting for this panel, and this topic came up, and it was just an interesting topic to hear the differing views about how adoption is talked about, even for those who have a common adoption thread. And one of the things that I noted is that when we hear there's a certain way to say things, if we're not familiar with the right lingo, we can almost be so afraid to say it wrong that we don't even bring it up. And so from that conversation, I think you would rather someone, and Jim, you can answer this, but then also answer the misconception question. You would rather someone, I'm sure, bring it up using the wrong terminology to open the door to educate and talk about your journey, if you want to kind of take that.
Well, that's true, because I was using the wrong language. And I was not attacked. I was very gently told how I should say it to be more positive. And it made a lot of sense. But for me, I have a little different look at adoption because I was adopted. My birth mother, or first mother, as some people call them, I knew she was from Michigan. And so I'm kind of like a bloodhound sometime. And I knew her last name and I knew kind of where she was from. So I figured out where she was from. And a friend of mine, by happenstance, his in-laws lived up there. And he said, well, while I'm there, I don't really want to spend time with my in-laws. So I will go to the library and look her up. And this was before cell phones, before the internet. And he discovered this thing in the library called the crisscross, which was names and phone numbers both ways. Okay. Kind of like the internet, but on paper. And sure enough, he found her in that town and he found her number and he called her. And I think having an agent like a son or a friend to call her, and my biological mother said, I knew this day would come sometime. And so my friend said, do you want to meet him? And she said, okay. So I happened to be going to Chicago and worked my way around over to Michigan and spent the weekend and went over to meet her for an afternoon. Now, she and I remain friends, but we don't have a relationship. I discovered that I do have some cousins in Michigan. But that's my perspective. Now, from being an adoptive parent involved with CPS, I would say that there are of adoption that people need to realize that and trauma. All right. And trauma, it causes some things to happen. We just thought, we'll love them. We will, well, because that's one of the things I know what to do. And they still suffer from 20 years old. Now, does that mean they're crippled or anything? No, it just means that they look back on their lives and say, something isn't quite right. There is abuse, physical, emotional. My babies were abused in the womb with drugs. So those are things that you need to realize. Those things can happen, and that is a part of any adoption story. And so we've had to learn over the years that there is trauma, and how do you deal with that? So,
speaking of CPS, there are a lot of children nationwide in foster care right now who are legally free to adopt. But yet there are people, families, who want to adopt overseas. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I'm not quite sure of the mindset behind that. But I did have comments given to me before that, well, I don't want to inherit problems from the child that's gone through the system. Well, how do you know that the child that you're adopting overseas isn't going to have problems too? And I don't even know when I was pregnant what any of my children,
Absolutely.
You
Yeah.
do not know, but there's that misconception that I try all the time to educate people on. And some people have their opinion and they're not going to change.
Yes.
So my brother-in-law's family, they adopted 4 kids, 2 from overseas and 2 through a kind of a placed adoption as well. The 2 from overseas, they are the ones with the most trauma-induced behavior. Yeah.
That is interesting. Well, Donna, I'm going to ask this one of you. From your experience, what role do community and faith play in making adoption a reality for families?
Okay, so going back to that phone call, we started trying to pray like, oh my gosh, a baby's going to be born and what do we do? So we started calling people. There were 3 people, a couple who had adopted, one who I didn't know was an attorney who used to run an adoption agency. Didn't know that. And a pastor. And we said we were having trouble praying about it. And they said, you know what? It might be because this is the answer to your prayers. Duh. Okay. Yeah, seriously, right? Why didn't we see that? But going forth, we had to see, and that community surrounded us and enveloped us. You're not going to follow this, but I'm going to tell it anyway. So how did we even get that phone call? My husband is an ordained minister, and he had done an internship at a church. That church had the couple that then let us know about this baby. They were going to adopt this baby. They had a 2-year-old son from a woman who was best friends with my birth mothers, right? So it was Alicia and her sister Stephanie, and then the other birth mother. That's how far, talk about community in their world, to then lead them to give our name, because Beth thought of me every Mother's Day knowing that I did not have a child and that I was always kind of sad. But what happened was that God used that sadness when I finally said, Lord, if I'm not going to be a mom, just take the desire away from me. Just, if I'm not supposed to be a mom, it's okay. Just help me with my faith to know what I'm supposed to do. And then we get the call. And then everybody was helping us. Everybody. Our faith community. I mean, this is before Facebook, right? Well, before, I don't know when Facebook happened, but talk about community. We had our work community. We had our church community. We had our families. It was just incredible. So community plays such a huge role. And at our 5th birthday, we finally had everybody together. Her birth mother was there. All of our family that could make it got there. And we had a huge blowout party at our subdivision that had a big pool, and, you could use it. We had about, 50 people there that loved her and care for her. So she knows she's a Davidson.
Yeah, she does. That's awesome. All right, Jim, I'm going to ask this question to you. What message would you want women facing an unplanned pregnancy to hear about adoption?
I think the key thing is there are a lot of people out here that want to adopt children, and there are probably more people that want to adopt than there are babies. There are a lot of children that are in the system still that could be adopted. To go back just a little bit, oddly enough, we have 4 couples that have been good friends of ours for over 20 years. And 2 couples have adopted kids as well. And so have some of our friends that are a little bit further off. So, and that's just one small group that between all of us, we have adopted 8 kids. So,
Amazing.
And just remember, there is help out there for you. There's community.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump into the next question, and then we'll allow you guys to share on those questions as well. Jim, if you could tell every legislator, pastor, or community leader in Texas one thing about adoption, what would it be?
Private adoption is too, I'll watch my language, expensive. It, in some cases, can be over $40,000 to $60,000. There should be safeguards. There should be rules that make it so it's not so expensive. I have a soapbox about that, which y'all got to hear when we had our private meeting. But it shouldn't be that expensive. And with so many people that are wanting to adopt, that is a high bar. For us, we didn't have that bar because we were involved in CPS. As a matter of fact, there is a picture up here of my son sitting at some point in the slides, sitting with a judge surrounded by, that's my family. But see, that's my son, Zach. And he was adopted on National Adoption Day. So the judge, the attorney, everything was free. I don't even think we had to pay for the paperwork, which, for the government, that's amazing. So, and that was the judge that we're being sworn in that we would take care of him. He still lives at my house, so we're still doing our job.
Awesome. I love that. All right, Jerry Ann, what one message would you want women facing an unplanned pregnancy to hear about adoption? And what would you say to any legislator, pastor, or community leader you could talk to?
Well, it's like I said before, adoption is a very loving, selfless act. And I think in talking to birth moms, from the very beginning, you know, when you meet somebody, whether they come into the doors of a pregnancy resource center or help center, you only have that one opportunity. And I'm just a strong advocate for adoption. And I believe strongly that adoption needs to be mentioned. Education is the key. Not just say the word, but if you've got staff or volunteers there, they really need to be educated and know themselves with confidence, you know, how to talk to a client about adoption. I know so many people who have, you know, gone through the yearly or annual training and think that that's enough. But I really believe that there needs to be more education. And I know National Council of Adoption, they do a lot of good work. But even on a local level, we need to have organizations that are having conferences or seminars or something, and I don't know how to legislate that. But that would be something that I would definitely want to see maybe churches sponsor, and I'd be happy to help you do it. I'm telling you, I would be happy to do it.
And you'd be great at it.
Thanks.
How about you, Donna? What message would you want women facing an unplanned pregnancy to hear about adoption? And what would you say to legislators, pastors, or community leaders?
Well, I would love for everybody to realize that Jesus was adopted. I would love everybody to realize that Moses was adopted. I would love everybody to realize that we are all adopted as children of God. Enough said.
She was going to drop the mic. Did you see that? She was like, that's true. That's actually my quiet time reading this morning. It's true. We're all adopted into God's family. If you could leave the audience, and I'll start here and we'll work our way down. Donna, if you could leave the audience with one takeaway thought on adoption, what would it be?
So that is a profound question. And the one thought I think I did just share, that we are all adopted. So adopted children should be treated no differently. My daughter likes to say we paid for her and we bought her and we've been paying for her ever since. And that's okay. And that's what I want people to be comfortable with, because adoption shouldn't be a dirty word in any way, shape, or form. We are all adopted as sons and daughters of God. And so if you have that perspective and that attitude, then hopefully, you know, it won't be as expensive maybe to help children who need parents. And it's difficult to live knowing that there are children out there that want to be in a home and have a family and be given more or have an adoption plan. But please know, it's just that sacrificial love of that mother was incredible. And that birth mother does not need to be ostracized, but needs to be honored for making the ultimate selfless act of love.
What was the question?
What one takeaway in 1 minute or less on adoption would you leave with the audience?
I just want to say that adoption can be a positive experience. And again, it goes back to the very beginning and how you talk to the birth mom, what you share with her, the people that are surrounding her in supporting her in her decision. It is so important. And I just want to share one thing about that. I used to train doctors and nurses, and I know Janine can nod her head for this. There are professionals that they don't have a positive outlook of social workers coming into the hospital, and they don't realize that you've spent, 4 months, whatever, dealing and helping this birth mom and preparing her legally and emotionally. They have no idea. So when you go in there, because I've been in many deliveries, many deliveries, and I've spent overnight in the hospital holding their hand and walking them through the process. And the hospital looks at you as a baby snatcher. like you're going to go in there and sweep that child up, but they don't understand. So I've done trainings, and I had one nurse come up to me at the end of one training, and she said to me, "What if I don't agree with adoption?" And I said to her, "It's not up to you to agree or disagree. Your job is to minister to her physical needs." And because one negative comment, and I'm kid you not, she could go through that whole pregnancy focusing on adoption. And then the nurse says, "I don't know how you could do that." Something negative, and I guarantee you she's going to change her mind. I guarantee you. So it's so important that she surround herself with just positivity all the way around. And so anyway, that's more than one word.
That's good. That's good. All right, Jim, what's your one takeaway thought on adoption?
My one takeaway, you were talking about the hospital. I do want to point out that I have 6 kids. So I have 4 bios and 2 adopted. And my wife said that the delivery for the 2 adopted was the easiest she ever had. She walked in, signed some papers, walked out with. So anyway, but she wasn't a baby snatcher. So I think the key thing that we all need to realize is that adoption may not be for you, but be a support for others. Like I said, we have 4 couples that are dear friends of ours for over 20 years. There are 3 of us that have adopted, but the other 2 have been supportive, and they have prayed with us, and they have come alongside us to help. That's what you can do, even if you don't feel led to go through the actual adoption process.
All right. Well, we have time now for Q&A. We have a third mic that we're going to hand to Joseph Kinlan, our board president.
Good.
And he is going around. If you have a question, if you could raise your hand. We have one over here by Tom Maynard.
I'm just kind of curious about, you talked a lot about the expense, and I'm curious what makes it so expensive, and how could organizations like Texas Alliance for Life maybe think about ways to support that and to reduce the expense of that?
Well, for me, I think there are organizations that help with mothers who are considering an adoption plan, but some of those organizations charge the adoptive parents a lot of money. The economics of it don't work out in my brain, but they still charge a lot. So profit.
Janine, do you want to speak on that? Can somebody give her a mic? Joseph, where are you? You don't have the answer? Can you tell us what your agency charges?
Functions in Austin. Thank you, really.
Can you say the name of your agency again?
Loving Hearts Christian Adoption Agency was created to take care of the girls within Sarah's House Maternity Home who chose adoption. And I often get that question. What do you do with all that money? First of all, it's $25,000, and it goes right back into the general fund to take care of the women. I mess with people though. Sometimes I go, somebody has to make that boat payment, just because it's such a negative connotation. Yeah. And it bothered me. And I called my mentor when I said, I am never doing an adoption agency ever. And it opened in 2012. And the main question has been, why do you need all that money? And I bring them into Sarah's House, which is $15,000 a month to do. And so one adoption, we only do 2 or 3 a year. It's very quiet. It's very under the wire. People don't know about us. And you talked about all those couples that want to adopt. We're short on couples. I don't know where they are or how to let them know that we're over there. So it's $25,000 plus a home study. And it goes right back just to keep us alive in the maternity home itself. So that has been the most negative. As I'm a birth mother and an adoptive mom, sorry, I wasn't adopted. So as coming from that angle, there's always going to be negativity. I tend to bat it back with humor. Our oldest was adopted. He said, Mom, how much did I cost? And I said, honey, you didn't cost anything. We paid some people to do paperwork. Well, then our biological child, younger, goes, how much did I cost? I said, $49.95, and I have the receipt. So it really is in how you approach it with humor and trying to remind yourself, just as Jerry Ann said, we're educators, and we need to do it positively and with the love of Jesus Christ, because he's going to smooth the rest through.
Well said. Thank you. Any other questions?
Here we go.
Tom McNew.
In keeping with the theme of Tom's asking questions. So what can we do legally, or what can we push our legislature to do to help maybe cut down some of these costs so that make it more manageable for each and every person involved?
That is a great question.
I knew I was going to ask a good one.
Any other Toms in the room want to ask a question? We'll open it up to other names. Any other names? Jim has a comment.
I don't think we want the legislature to legislate adoption. And the $25,000 is much more affordable. I have some friends that paid $60,000 a few years back to adopt a child, and so I think maybe opening up some sort of statewide directory of places where people could adopt, and the prices would be upfront.
There's an organization called Shohana's Hope, and it was founded by Stephen Curtis Chapman, if anybody knows who he is. He has an organization where, and I'm sure it's a lengthy process to get in there, but they will actually supplement and help with a grant for people who have, financial struggles in adopting, but they help people.
All right, we have one more question.
And it's not from a Tom. It's a Brian.
Hi, I'm Tom. Thank you. People constantly in other states say that Texas is very harsh on women. You don't allow abortions, don't give them choices. I'm happy to say, our state steps up with $200 million to help women in need. So let's hear a cheer for our state for that. Save people from this path, but give them a way to do it. Can any of that $200 million help this situation we're talking about with adoption? That's my question.
Some of it actually does, and that's a great point that we didn't touch on in the messaging. The Thriving Texas Families money is allocated to support pregnancy centers, maternity homes, and adoption agencies across the state of Texas. I know I saw a little soft clap there, but we could probably do a little bigger clap for that. And it's just a matter of applying. And so we're always happy to point you to people that can help with that process. We have some things in the works to help pregnancy centers, maternity homes, and adoption agencies in that process. But it is there. It's available. And it just shows that Texas not only works to protect babies, they work to provide for women and families. And they do that in a major way. And we've seen the funding increase each legislative session. And so it's a huge priority for Texas. And so in a lot of ways, they very much support it. And there are some other marketing campaigns that are out on adoption, and we can all do our part to educate our community as well. And that's one of the takeaways that I'm getting. We all have a role to play in educating and talking about adoption. And it's not taboo. Birth moms aren't to be ostracized, but loved. And we need more couples who are willing to adopt. And we need to get the word out there about our adoption agencies. And so there's a lot of takeaways today. We all have a part to play. And we're grateful to be on this journey with each of you. And with that, I want to thank our panelists. And we'll go ahead and transition. Thank you.